tennis. And just recently I had someone tell me that, and I had to look this person up because I didn't know who they were, but he said I look like Adam Savage from Mythbusters. So I had to look that, and I said, yeah, actually, you're quite right. I do look like that guy.
What does that guy look like? Remind us.
Adam. Oh, he's gorgeous. He's gorgeous, of course. The guy from Mythbusters with the slight ginger and the same kind of glasses.
Was it a compliment or not?
I took it as a compliment. The guy's intelligent. The guy's intelligent, and he's got an awesome name, Adam Savage. It doesn't get much better than that.
Well, that's just about it from us. Oh, this person said, my mum's name is Karen Hay. Pretty cool growing up. Spelled with an E. So, yeah, I don't know.
Did she ever host Radio with Pictures? Did she ever host that show?
The text doesn't say that. We've got to go now anyway. So, Wade, good luck with what is it not a play? The
sketch show, Silence of the Sheeple.
The show.
Yes.
Wade Jackson, Artistic Director at the Covert Theatre. Thank you very much. And Paula Penfold. Journalist, Paula Penfold, investigative journalist. Thanks, Paula.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up to 1 minute to 5, and Checkpoint is next.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere ake nei, the police are regular lawbreakers according to an inquiry into how they take and store photos. Their union's labelled the findings ridiculous and reckons criminals will walk free. Northland gets some love. The Minister for Emergency flies over its flood-damaged roads and promises cash, but the details are in the air too. The COVID traffic light system could be switched off for good. What do you think? The queue for visitor visas means holiday hell for some, but there's at least one happy camper, a leopard seal. We'll tell you that story too. You can watch us live on Sky Channel 83 or Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5. Ahi Marie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. An Auckland lawyer wants better ways for the public to complain about police behaviour after revelations officers have been routinely and illegally photographing people. An investigation by the Privacy Commission and the Independent Police Conduct Authority has found problems with the way police are photographing, storing and using people's biometric information. The investigation was launched after RNZ reported in 2020 that several innocent young Māori were stopped and photographed in Wairarapa. Lawyer Kingi Snelger says the complaint system is inadequate.
I would like to see more emphasis on creating those channels for our people to raise concerns when they arise, rather than having to, rely on good journalism and whānau to come forward. I suspect that there are many other issues.
Kingi Snelgo questions whether the problem would have come to light if the Wairarapa whānau hadn't come forward. The Prime Minister says Cabinet will consider the pressure on hospitals when it reviews the country's COVID restrictions next week. COVID numbers continue to stabilise, with 1,653 new community cases recorded today. Jacinda Ardern says ministers will be looking at several issues, including whether the traffic light system should be scrapped and what future COVID protections will look like.
In his closing submission, Ron Mansfield accused
Obviously not Jacinda Ardern. Cabinet ministers will next meet on Monday and an announcement is expected later in the week. The lawyers for former National MP Jamie Lee Ross says his client lied to the Serious Fraud Office in an effort to implicate National's former leader Simon Bridges. Mr Ross and 6 others are charged over alleged fraudulent political donations. Andrew McRae reports.
In his closing submission, Ron Mansfield QC told the High Court that Mr Ross's admissions to the SFO were unreliable and lies, describing his actions as kamikaze. He says Mr Ross was seeking revenge because he felt Mr Bridges hadn't promoted him as expected. Mr Mansfield says Mr Ross was fixated on revenge and that the only way he could take down Mr Bridges was to implicate himself in the alleged fraud. He says Mr Ross was suffering mental health issues at the time. The 7-week trial has now finished, with the judge reserving his decision.
The police in Canada have confirmed the last and main suspect of killing 10 people in a mass stabbing has died after being arrested. 32-year-old Miles Sanderson had been on the run since Monday, prompting a large manhunt. Police Assistant Commissioner Rhonda Blackmore reveals the moment the search ended.
Police officers surrounded the vehicle and through verbal identification confirmed the identity of the driver to be Miles Sanderson. A knife was located inside the vehicle. Shortly after his arrest, he went into medical distress and he was transported to a hospital in Saskatoon. He was pronounced deceased at the hospital.
Sanderson's brother and the other suspect, Damien, was found dead earlier in the week. Tens of thousands of dollars worth of drugs and firearms have been netted in the biggest bust in more than a decade in Canterbury. Search warrants were executed in Ashburton this week. The police seized more than $70,000 worth of drugs, including methamphetamine, cannabis and LSD. Firearms and around $20,000 in cash was also seized. 18 people, many with gang connections, face more than 160 charges. A protest leader in Taranaki says his group will pursue legal action after 10 people were arrested at Mount Messenger. The police forcibly ended the month-long occupation against the bypass on State Highway 3. 6 people were arrested for trespass after refusing to leave, and 4 people were arrested for obstruction. Ngāti Tama and Ngāti Hapu o Pautama have issued their own trespass order against Wakakotahi and are making a complaint to police. In sport, the Black Caps have snared 2 early wickets in the second Chapel Hadley One-Day Cricket International against Australia in Cairns. Having won the toss and opting to bowl, Matt Henry has dismissed Aaron Finch and David Warner to have Australia 19 for 2 after 6 overs. Australia won the opening game of the 3-match series. Former All Black Sonny Bill Williams will fight former UFC star Mark Hunt in a boxing match in Sydney in November. It'll be Williams' first bout since March, while Hunt hasn't fought in nearly 2 years. The 37-year-old Williams is undefeated in his 9 professional fights, while the 48-year-old Hunt has yet to win any of his 3 professional boxing bouts.
Just keen to stay active in the boxing ring. I grew up watching Mark and what he does, so it's an honour to get in the ring and share it with him. But I know when we get in there'll be no niceties, and I know he'll be looking to essentially knock me out, and I'll be trying to do the same.
Nick Kyrgios has been given the biggest fine of the US Tennis Open so far for his misbehaviour in his quarter-final loss. He's been fined $23,000 for throwing a drink bottle and then smashing 2 rackets. He had been fined in early matches for spitting and swearing. All up, his tournament fines are now $54,000, although having won $780,000 in prize money at the tournament, he should be able to cover the bill. And rugby commentator and former Tonga international Willie Losse has died suddenly in South Africa, where he was covering the Rugby World Cup Sevens. He was 55. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Kate Breach, founding member and president of the Committee of Women in Space Aotearoa, New Zealand, on her work to get a Kiwi woman into orbit and beyond. This week's overseas correspondent, Gregor Thompson, is on the line from Paris, and forensic accountant Amanda Gore reports back on her trip following the dirty money all the way to the casinos of Las Vegas. On Nights with Shout at Ryan. In for me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
You're on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. Auckland and Northland mostly fine, isolated showers mainly in the afternoon and evening. For the remainder of the North Island, also Nelson and Buller, partly cloudy with isolated showers today, mostly fine tomorrow morning, then scattered showers from around midday, mainly inland, possibly heavy about the ranges. For Marlborough, areas of cloud and a few showers, clearing most places tomorrow evening, but the odd shower is lingering about the coast. Canterbury, partly cloudy, isolated showers today and about Banks Peninsula tomorrow. Otago and Southland, also for Westland and Fiordland, generally fine with areas of low cloud morning and night. And for Re Kohu, the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods today, mainly fine tomorrow. It's 7 minutes past 5. I'll have the latest news headlines and any traffic news at about 20 past 5.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A major investigation into police conduct has found officers have been routinely and illegally photographing members of the public. It's also found thousands of pictures have been stored with no legitimate purpose amid other questionable conduct. But the police and its Officers Association are defending the approach. Jamie Tahana reports.
The Independent Police Conduct Authority and the Privacy Commission found thousands of photos have been taken, often illegally, and stored improperly. Deputy Privacy Commissioner Liz McPherson says it's been going on for a decade.
What the report shows is that there is a fundamental lack of awareness amongst police of their obligations under the Privacy Act.
The inquiry considered 5 complaints. 2 were dismissed because of their historic nature. But in the other 3, it was found that the police were not justified and the photographs were unnecessary. Sometimes people were photographed for simply looking out of place or suspicious. In one case, an officer illegally threatened to arrest a Māori teen if they refused to be photographed. A broader investigation found the police have developed an illegal practice of taking duplicate photos of rangatahi in custody. So, alongside official photographs, which have to be destroyed once a prosecution is made, they'll also take what they call voluntary pictures, to be held indefinitely. A barrister, Marie Taylor-Cyphers, says the findings aren't surprising. She says even amid a spike in crime, young people still have fundamental rights.
And it's difficult for the police to investigate, and I appreciate that fully. But where it becomes potentially a little roughshod is when the youth's rights are trampled on. When police speak to youths without getting consent from their caregivers or photograph them, it is unlawful.
The investigation was launched after RNZ reported in 2020 that several innocent young Māori were stopped and photographed in the Wairarapa. A Manukau lawyer, Kingi Snelga, questions whether this would have ever been known if the Wairarapa whānau hadn't come forward.
I would like to see more emphasis on creating those channels for our people to raise concerns when they arise, rather than having to rely on good journalism and whānau to come forward. I suspect that there are many other issues out there.
The Police Commissioner, Andrew Costa, says there are lessons to be learned from the report and reviews are underway. In some instances, families are being apologised to. He says illegally held photographs are being deleted, though he can't say how many there are.
We have taken significant steps to remove photographs from our system that we believe are taken unlawfully. The work we need to do on our systems is getting to a single way of collating and putting those together so that we can manage disposal, all of those sorts of things.
But he's defended officers' ability to take photographs, saying not being able to will hamper the ability to prevent crime. In December, the Privacy Commission ordered police to stop collecting duplicate photos of young people and to delete all illegal images. Mr. Costa says this has made investigations difficult, though he wouldn't be drawn on whether he'd advocate for a law change.
We are complying with the compliance notice from the Privacy Commissioner at this point in time, and the report acknowledges that. What I have heard is that our people are finding that they are constrained in their ability to prevent and solve crime as a result of that, and these are the things we need to work through.
The Police Association went further. Its president, Chris Cahill, has called for the investigation to be ignored altogether, saying it's out of step with what police officers need to do every day.
And that was Jamie Tahana reporting. In about 20 minutes' time, we'll speak to the Police Association President Chris Cahill. Love to know your thoughts on this one. What do you make of the police behaviour? Text us on 2101 or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is 12 minutes after 5. Kia mau tunu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And still to come, the government is considering doing away with the traffic light system completely. What do you think about that? And where do you think masks still need to be worn, or should we get rid of them altogether? 2101 on text. The Emergency Management Minister is promising Northland cash to fix its flood-damaged roads, but can't say how much or when he'll deliver on the commitment. Today, Kieran McAnulty flew over the severely flood-damaged section of State Highway 1 that's closed indefinitely at the Mangamuka Gorge, as well as to see other busted-up regional roads. It means locals and visitors are having to take lengthy diversions, and freighting is costing businesses more in time and money. The Far North Deputy Mayor has been highly critical of the government's response, saying to date no minister's bothered to view the damage since the highway closure mid-August, and the district is not a priority. Emergency Management Minister Kieran McAnulty says that's not true.
I'm not sure that's a fair assessment. In any weather event, you're going to prioritise those regions that declare local emergencies. And so with this same weather event that hit Northland, we also had Taranaki hit, Nelson, Tasman, West Coast, Bulla and Marlborough. And obviously we're going to prioritise those regions that had state of emergencies declared. But at the first opportunity that I was able to and appropriate, I came up today. And that was a date that we agreed with the Mayor actually last week. And I was grateful for the opportunity.
Was that to come up exclusively to deal with flood issues, or were you already programmed to go up there to talk about Three Waters and other things?
Not to talk Three Waters, but I was programmed to come up here as part of my tour of rural and provincial councils. And when I spoke to Mayor John Carter last week, he agreed that today would be the appropriate day. We put it to them that we can either meet them as a council or go up in the year, and if we go up in the year, we'll come back at another date to meet with the council, and that's what we finished up with.
So what have you seen?
Extensive damage, not just on State Highway 1, but also on local roads as well. It's going to take some time to not just clear the damage, but also assess the extent of it. There's 15 slips along State Highway 1, and 4 of them need pretty significant geotechnical assessments. So Waka Kotahi started straight away, but it's still going to take some time.
Does it look pricey?
Yeah, it does, and I think it signals something that every region in the whole country need to be aware of, is ultimately with climate change, these weather events, they're going to become more frequent, they're going to become more severe. And, I was looking at today through 2 lenses, one as Associate Minister of Transport, but also emergency management. And at the forefront of my mind is resilience. And I think it's through that lens that we've got to think of all future investment in infrastructure moving forward.
Northland residents would argue there is no resilience for them in the roading network at the moment. Some people are having to travel 3 hours because the gorge is out, including a teacher. And businesses are having to take the long way round, and time is money, right? Fuel is really expensive in the moment. What can you do to help them now?
Well, my immediate focus will be alongside my colleagues Willa Jean Prime and Kelvin Davis. We're heading straight back to Wellington now, and we'll be discussing this with senior ministers and probably the Prime Minister if we get the opportunity, because we're all meeting up tonight in Wellington. So that'll be my first focus. Obviously, we need to...
What are you asking them for, Minister? What do you want their help with? Are you going to ask for money?
I won't be asking for any specifics until we get that assessment done. We need to understand the extent of the damage first. We're talking about not just overslips, but also underslips. We're talking about significant cracks in the road that are still moving. This is going to take some time. But other ministers, through their portfolios, they need to be aware of the extent of the damage, the disruption that it's causing in Northland, and potentially what assistance could be available. I mean, ultimately, we're talking about local roads and state highway. And even though we've seen a $50 million increase in funding available to the council since we come into government for local roads, that's still not doing what needs to be done due to the underinvestment that they're facing leading up to the point that we got in.
So I'm just wondering how any of what you are telling me right now is demonstrating to this community in Northland that they are a priority to you.
Well, I don't think that's fair. I mean, we came up today. I arrived in Dargaville last night at 1 a.m. from Dunedin, travelling, going to great extent to get up here so that I could show that this is important to the government. And on the ground, we've got a senior minister in Kelvin Davis and local MP in Willa Jean Prime who have been, just like me, in touch with the local council and with Waka Kotahi throughout. But it is unfair.
But it's the first time a minister's come up to have eyes on the damage, isn't it? And the road's been out since mid-August, 18th, around about of August?
Well, no, like I say, my local colleagues have been here throughout and have been in touch with the council and with the contractors and relaying that back. I myself rang Mayor John Carter on day one and have stayed in touch with him regularly throughout. So just like I have with the mayors of Taranaki, who are in a very similar situation to Northland with the state of their roads in the initial instance. So Ultimately, and from my perspective, my priority was those regions that declared local states of emergency. Then we rely on those contacts we have on the ground, and then when appropriate, we get up here ourselves.
Can you give any assurances today to that community that there is going to be tangible assistance?
Yes,
Money,
I can. I just
basically.
can't. Absolutely, I can, Lisa. I just can't go into details as to how that will be come to fruition, but I can absolutely guarantee that where there is the support needed, it will be provided.
And that was the Emergency Management Minister, Karen McAnulty. 2101 on text. Is that enough? If you live in the Northland area, we'd love to hear from you. Hundreds of Marlborough Sounds residents remain cut off after a storm caused further damage to the remote roading network for the second time in as many years. Residents in the worst affected areas of Kinepuru Sound, or Kiwi Bay, French Pass, Port Underwood and Queen Charlotte Sound no longer have road access and have been forced to find alternative means of getting in and out. Samantha G took a barge trip to meet those adjusting to a new way of life.
As the Johnson's barge Pukatea steams through the Kinepuru Sound, a small red car is visible above the sandy beach at Waimar Bay. It belongs to Chrissy Sumby, and up above her house you can see where a huge section of the road has fallen away.
The Kinepuru Road from Linkville right through goes through our property. The rain was like 3 days non-stop, heavy airs, and it just made a whole lot of I didn't even hear the slip happening. It just creaking trees and then there's a silent and you go outside to find there's a slip.
Her house is yellow stickered. She has no road access and has had to walk out to catch rides over the water with others. Now she's getting the barge to bring her car out to the settlement of Havelock within the Sounds.
There's a lot of us like that. We don't always have boat access. We use the car because it's easy to get from A to B. And then to find, well, hey, we might not look after your roads. Well, that's not fair. You pay the rates. What's the rates for? We don't use anything else. We just want a nice solid road that we can all use.
Johnson's barge service skipper Jared Rowe says since the rain they've been transporting vehicles to and from places they wouldn't usually.
Carting people in and out, Marlborough lines a lot, getting power back on. We have been doing a little bit of groceries for people because they can't get out. And just general people in and out so they can get to town rather than driving through the road. And it's quite good fun really. Put a smile on a lot of people's faces.
Raymond Smith drove onto the barge in Havelock loaded with supplies, groceries, diesel and beer for his neighbours. He's heading home across the water to Anamahanga, Port Gore, for the first time since the rain 3 weeks ago. It's a 2-hour journey to Fish Bay on the barge, then another hour's drive after that. He's a bit anxious about what he might find.
Things look okay from the outside. The people that were working on the road could only see outside, but we do believe that there could be some water issues on the inside. And the power was off for 4 days, so the freezers would have gone down, and we got to deal with any food that's maybe gone spoiled in the fridge.
Staggers has just finished a week's work on the Cook Strait ferry and is bound for his home in Waitaria Bay with a truck and trailer load of gravel.
You get that old Soundsy feeling because people, they can't just drive here anymore. It's a lot more, it's cut off.
He's not too optimistic about being able to use Kinepuru Road again.
Forget about it. I think the road is actually stuffed. And I don't think they should have, looking at the road, they should never tar sealed it because that's where all the problems are. The water gets under the tar seal and it's just lifted the whole road up. That's the way it looks to me anyway.
Mel James and her partner are also yet to see their home in Waitaria Bay after the deluge. They've heard reports that parts of the Kinepuru Road are non-existent.
It's quite devastating and I think it would be good if there was a plan, and I think it'd put a lot of people's minds at rest. It's hard to know what the future holds when no one's really giving anything away.
Marlborough District Council says close to 700 kilometres of the Sounds road network has been damaged. Contractors are still working to reinstate emergency access while assessing the full extent of the damage.
And that was Samantha G with that story. We're going to put that up on our webpage. Do check it out. There are some absolutely glorious photos and videos with that one. It is almost 22 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A lot of you getting in touch about the police photos situation. This is the inquiry that found police are regularly, illegally taking photos of people and storing them. Paul says it's either illegal or it's not. If any police are defending illegal behaviour on the part of themselves or their colleagues, they should be sacked. But this one too, we need to cut the cops some slack. Crime rates are rocketing and no freedom is without cost. Wouldn't do the job myself. It is thankless. Coming up, Aotearoa is open for visitors, but it's taking a long time to process visas. We talk to immigration. Homai o whakaaro, we'd love your thoughts on anything you've heard on the program this evening, on that police report into photo taking, or anything else that's on your mind. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time to go to the headlines now. Ko Iwi anō tēnei.
An Auckland lawyer says whānau need accessible channels to complain about police conduct. An inquiry has found the police are routinely and illegally photographing and filming people. Lawyer Kingi Snelger told Checkpoint that he wonders whether the issue would have come to light if several innocent young Māori who were stopped and photographed in Wairarapa hadn't come forward. The Prime Minister says Cabinet will consider a number of issues, including whether the traffic light system should be scrapped altogether and the pressure on hospitals when it reviews the country's COVID restrictions next week. Police in Canada have confirmed the last and main suspect of killing 10 people in a mass stabbing has died after being arrested. 32-year-old Miles Sanderson had been on the run since Monday. President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukraine's military has recaptured a number of settlements during a counter-offensive against Russian forces near the northeastern city of Kharkiv. The Emergency Management Minister has promised flood-hit Northland financial support to fix its roads, but he won't say how much or when he'll deliver a funding package. Kieran McAnulty told Checkpoint that much of the damage is ongoing and still needs to be assessed. And a leopard seal that visited Petone Beach in Wellington today has now left to seek new shores. The Department of Conservation says the seal was last seen heading towards Soames Island. You can hear more about the seal later in Checkpoint. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, nothing to report on any of the major roads at the moment. I'll be back with more news headlines and any traffic news at 5:40.
Kia ora rā iho, and yes, do stand by for that story about the seal. But in the meantime, Nick Kyrgios has wowed the crowds at the US Open in New York, but the Australian tennis star has lost more than a chance to win his first Grand Slam singles title after his quarterfinal defeat last night. With me now to explain it all is sports reporter Clay Wilson. Okay, bit of a rough 24 hours, and I don't know how many tennis rackets sacrificed on the altar of defeat, Clay.
Just a couple this time. We obviously talked about him earlier in the week, and the history he has, but he's been playing great tennis. Unfortunately lost last night in 5 sets. Well, unfortunately for his fans, to Russian Karen Khachanov, and a bit frustrated, not feeling too great, pulled a couple of rackets out of the bag and slammed them into the court after the game, and that's cost him the biggest fine of the event so far, around 23,000 New Zealand dollars, bringing his total fines for the tournament to over 50,000 New Zealand dollars. But when you come away from the tournament with around $800,000 in prize money, played doubles as well, remember, not too much of a dent, $50,000.
So he can afford to have a wobbly, is what you're saying, is it?
I think so, yeah. Well, he's had a few over the years, and I think he's still doing okay for himself. In terms of what it means for Nick Kyrgios, I think the encouraging thing for his fans was he was really devastated after the game. He said it and he looked it as well. In the past, sometimes you almost seen apathy from Nick Kyrgios in these big losses, almost like he didn't care as much as other players. So hopefully something like this motivates him to continue playing the way he has been playing, which is really well and consistently over the last few months. He made the final at Wimbledon, and I think it's good for tennis in a lot of ways. While he's a love or hate kind of player for a lot of people, I mean, you only got to see the crowds that turn up to see him. I'm sure the TV figures back that up. So let's hope he continues to play well anyway.
He was really blunt, wasn't he? He was basically saying anything after winning is first loser home, in his mind.
Which I think a lot of people relate to. A lot of people can agree with that. Sometimes you get these kind of cliched lines out of athletes, and for someone to come and just say, well, I don't really care about the other events, I just want to play well.
I wanted to win.
I wanted to win the majors, so yeah.
Yeah, well, you do have to admire his honesty. OK, Sonny Bill Williams in the news today. What's going on?
Well, we know Sonny Bill's been boxing. He started
He's
boxing
done everything.
before he won those Rugby World Cups and played league and all the things he did. He's unbeaten after 10 professional fights, and he's going to have another fight in November in Sydney, and he's going to fight a name that a lot of Kiwi sports fans will know well, and that's Mark Hunt. He was a former K1 kickboxing world champion. He spent time in the UFC, did really well in the UFC for a long time. He's 48 now, Sonny Bill's 37, so they're both getting on a bit, but just their names alone will draw plenty of people in to this fight. They're both also of Samoan heritage, and both Auckland Rays, living in Australia now, but worth noting that I think those factors will bring people in to this fight. And just before I go, some sad news to finish on today, that we heard that the former rugby international and really well-regarded commentator Willie Losse has passed away. He was in South Africa about to commentate on the Rugby World Cup Sevens tournament, which is about to happen. Played provincially for Auckland, for North Harbour, captain Tonga at the 95 World Cup, was very proud of that.
Yep, said it was one of his greatest moments.
Moved into radio, and obviously was in TV for a long time doing sevens, all kinds of things. Very well liked. I never got a chance to meet him, but by all accounts, a very well liked and respected man. So obviously condolences to his family and friends, and just sad news that we're not going to hear his voice on the airwaves anymore.
Yeah, really sad and unexpected. Thanks, Clay. That is Clay Wilson, our sports reporter there. And let's return to our earlier story about the investigation that's found police were routinely and illegally taking photos and film of children and adults. Police have accepted some but not all of the findings from the inquiry, while the Police Association has flat out rejected the report's conclusions. And the Police Association President Chris Cahill joins us now. Kia ora, Chris.
Kia ora, Lisa.
Why shouldn't the police have to follow the law?
It's the interpretation of the law that we don't agree with. It's gone too far. It lacks common sense. These are photographs of people in public places. These are photographs of gang members gathering together. These are photographs of juveniles out late at night in circumstances that are likely that they're probably up to no good. These are things that the public would expect the police to be able to do to actually respond to the crime that's going on out there, prevent it and to solve it.
If there's a crime going on, you can do something. You're drawing a bit of a long bow, aren't you? Because the report says you can keep taking photos. You just need to make sure that it is a reasonable possibility the suspect could be relevant to a current investigation. Pretty clear.
Well, it's not clear. I mean, that reasonable, they give the prime example that I'll use that they say we can't do is police stop a group of youths 1 o'clock in the morning in Auckland, and they take photographs of them because they think they're up to no good. Now, currently, we would do that, and if there was a ramrod that night, we'd compare those photographs and say, are these the offenders? And in fact, that might be a good way to rule those people out as being the offenders.
But they haven't committed a crime, Chris, have they? At the time that you were gathering that information, they haven't committed a crime, nor are they reasonably a suspect in a current investigation at that time. So it's illegal.
Well, I don't believe it is illegal. That's their view. It's not our view. It's a public place, and we believe police should be able to gather that information. What I will accept is that how they retain that information needs to be looked at, and they are probably retaining it too long, retaining it after it's actually of value either evidentially or for intelligence purposes. If there's no ram raids that night, you would argue that there's no need to keep the photograph for a lot longer. Those sorts of things. But gang members, for instance, the intelligence you gain from gang members photographing them gathering together can be relevant for all sorts of reasons. We've just got new legislation around asset seizures. Well, proving someone's a gang member, proving someone's a gang associate is part of that legislation. Taking photographs of them proves that.
Chris, if people listening here, it will sound like you were saying that the police need to break the law in order to uphold the law. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not, because we're not accepting that this report is correct in saying police are currently breaking the law. I mean, if we look at the situation they raised with voluntary fingerprints, they're saying that because the Police Act doesn't say you can take voluntary fingerprints, you can't do it. That's a nonsense. Just because something doesn't say you can't do something doesn't mean police can't. We've been gathering voluntary fingerprints where the youth and a parent or guardian signs of confirmation that it's voluntary. They've solved hundreds of crimes, including homicides.
The point of the report, Chris, and I suppose that I understand the point you're making, and the report actually focuses in on that. And what it says is you cannot consent to something that is unlawful. So regardless of whether you get the person's permission to do it, their reasoning is it's unlawful to start off with. You can't get them to consent away the law, so you shouldn't be doing it.
Well, they're only saying it's unlawful because there's nothing in the Police Act that say you can do it. What a nonsense. That means if your house is burgled, I couldn't ask you for elimination fingerprints voluntarily to rule the fingerprints where we.
That's not true. They say crime scene photographs and crime scene fingerprints are in a different kettle of fish. So that's apples with pears.
They're elimination prints from you. They're voluntary prints.
From a crime scene, though.
They're not from a crime scene. They're your ones that I'm taking off you to compare with crime scene prints. This is how bizarre their view is. The idea
so what
just
do you think the consequences?
In an act, you can't do it is bizarre.
What do you think?
Okay.
And I just want to be specific, Chris. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to be specific. So do you have a real-life example of a consequence where something might get thrown out right now because some of the evidence gathered is not approved according to this inquiry?
Yeah, I certainly do. I can tell you there is hundreds, and I'm saying hundreds of positive fingerprint hits that identify offenders for burglaries, thefts, robberies, and maybe even more serious offences that will be thrown out. So these people will not be held to account. These will be victims of crime, will not have their burglary solved because of this ruling.
Really appreciate your time, Chris. That's Chris Cahill from the Police Association. It is 27 minutes to 6. Really want your thoughts on that one. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at @CheckpointRNZ. Is it okay to bend the rules a little bit in order to stop crimes? Although the Police Association says it's not bending the rules, the report says they are breaking the law. Kia mau tonu mai, you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National, and it's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nāianei, ko Nona Peltier, who joins us in the studio to talk business. Okay, hotel industry is looking to bring forward developments as the tourism sector bounces back. I mean, how much development are we talking about?
Well, not very much in Auckland, where we've seen a lot of new hotels coming on board. Just today, for example, I was checking out a couple of new facilities, the Holiday Inn Express and the Voco Hotel. They're really unusual combination of two different types of hotels in the same building, and that's just opened during COVID. There was another one that opened in Queenstown, but the one that opened in Queenstown, it's already fully occupied basically, and the hotels industry is expecting that in some areas like Queenstown, perhaps even Rotorua and or Wellington and those other areas outside of Auckland are already seeing accommodation demand for accommodation being outstripped basically by the supply.
That's kind of interesting because all those hotels that were being used for COVID NICU facilities presumably are coming back online. You would have thought you'd had plenty.
You'd think so. But maybe not, because we have heard also that a lot of motels and that kind of accommodation has been housing people who were otherwise homeless, and during COVID they moved into those facilities and perhaps they're still there. So there isn't as much availability as people might think. And so the industry was expecting to start building new hotels, say 3 to 5 years. Now they're looking next year, this year.
Interesting, Nona. Okay, demand for office space in our major cities, no sign of wavering there. Again, I find this interesting because we're told that people are working from home. So what are the numbers?
Exactly. Well, look, in Auckland, vacancy rates, they were only marginally increased. So that's 0.1% in the second quarter. That's like no change at all. And that was versus the first quarter, 11.6. So you can see quickly how the vacancy rates are falling. And so what's happening is people are coming back to work. And certainly, like I say, today I was out, walking down the street around 9, just before 9, and there was loads of people obviously busy getting into the office and so on. So there are people out there, at least in Auckland, and so certainly in other parts of the country, we have seen that people are returning to work. Yeah, but they still, despite that, we see a lot of evidence that although people are returning to work, they still want the flexibility to be able to work from home. That, I think, hasn't changed. And one of the other things that I saw was some report that recently there's been a new building that's just opened down by the Bowen campus down near Parliament, and it's a design for that basically, come and go type of workplace, and it has members now that are big companies that have signed up for this because their staff want to be able to come and go as well. So, it's a changing environment. We'll see how it all works out.
Yeah,
but
flexible.
I think it's very flexible and different than we've seen for a while.
Should we take a spin around the markets, Nona?
Well, you know what? Our top 50 index, it rose 1.1% today. Yeah, so that will be look at the smile on your face. Yeah, that's a 130-point rise to 11,678. That's in line with what we're seeing in this region. And that's ahead of a speech by the U.S. Federal Reserve overnight. And we're waiting also to hear from the European Central Bank. They're going to have their news on rate hikes or not. So the dollar is trading very little changed from what we talked about yesterday. 60.5 US cents, 89.8 Australian, and 52.6 pence. And who knows what will happen tomorrow.
Thank you, Nona. Nona Peltier with Business News there. Wannabe visitors to New Zealand want to know why it's taking so long to get a visitor's visa. Fewer than 1 in 5 visitor visa applications have been approved since August when the borders fully opened. Some are waiting 5 weeks or more for a ticket to enter. Well, joining us now is Alison McDonald, Deputy Secretary at Immigration New Zealand. Kia ora, Alison.
Kia ora.
What's the hold-up?
So we've never opened a border before is the biggest thing, and the demand's been much higher than we thought it would be in the first couple of weeks. Other countries have found the same as they've opened their borders. Volumes are really unpredictable.
So when you say volumes are really unpredictable, how did your forecast compare with reality?
We forecast probably a third of what we got within the first couple of weeks.
And so why so low with your forecasting?
Well, we talked to other countries who'd opened before us, and we kind of took a best guess, to be honest, because nobody knows what's happening. It's very unpredictable when you open a border.
The thing is, well, how does it compare to pre-COVID? Because obviously you would be used to, I'm assuming, processing way more visas. So do you not have the same staff levels, or what's changed around that?
Yes, it's not a staffing level thing, it's the volume that's come in at one time. In terms of visitors coming to New Zealand, over 285,000 people have applied to come to visit New Zealand, and around 250,000 of those can travel because most of them are from visa waiver countries. So what we're talking about is the 45,000 people who did need to apply for a visitor visa, and we're working through those. We've approved nearly 10,000 of them so far.
Why can't you scale up faster?
Well, we're doing what we can. We're working on process improvements. We've also got to balance this against the needs of lots of different categories of visa application at the moment. Lots of people need other people to come into New Zealand. We need workers, working holiday schemes. We're also processing the largest ever residency scheme for the country.
But at the same time, just because we're bringing residents in does not mean that visitors can't come as well. And
absolutely not.
You knew those things were happening, so why has the planning not met demand?
Well, we clearly didn't get the planning right because the volumes were unpredictable. But we are doing what we can to work on process improvements. We're moving a few more people onto visitor. But as I say, we need to balance that against the need to get workers in as well.
So what is the average wait time?
The average wait time is variable at the moment. So the people who were first in got processed within kind of 8 to 10 days. But obviously, because volumes came in a large amount, but the queue is backing up.
So right now, what's the wait time?
So right now, it varies depending on what checks we need to do on a visa application.
Alison? Ballpark.
Ballpark, more than the 20 working days that I want to get to, Lisa.
OK, and I notice in a statement you say that your new visa processing platform continues to bed in. What does that mean? It's not working?
Oh, it is working. The system itself
but not
is really
properly?
well tested. No, it's working as we expected it to do. So the delays are simply because of the amount coming through that need an immigration officer to have a look. It's not the system, it's the volumes coming through that we need to check. So we need to balance, the ease of application for people, getting things through quickly, but also doing checks that I think every New Zealander expects us to do.
How would you rate your performance?
It's not where I want it to be.
And so what do you need to do to get there? And how fast can you do that?
Well, we're looking at some process improvements to automate some of the work. I'm hoping those will come through in the next couple of weeks. We really want to try and get ourselves in flow as quickly as we can because we're conscious that people are depending on us to come and visit their relatives and visit New Zealand.
Thanks for joining us this evening. That is Alison McDonald, who's the Deputy Secretary at Immigration New Zealand. It is 20 to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your thoughts on that one. Homai or Whakaaro, do you have whānau in the queue to get a visitor's visa? How long have they been waiting for? And where does it leave you if you can't get the visa in the time allowed? We're told there that waiting beyond the target time of 21 days, I think it was. Text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email. The address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to get to the headlines. Anea Iwi, mina pitipita kōrero.
The lawyer for former National MP Jamie Lee Ross has told the High Court that his client lied to the Serious Fraud Office to get revenge on National's former leader Simon Bridges. Mr Ross and 6 others are charged over alleged fraudulent political donations. The police commissioner is remaining tight-lipped over the investigation into 2 children's remains found in suitcases. The children's identities have been suppressed at the request of family. Andrew Costa says he can't say anything about the ongoing investigation, including whether the police are working with their counterparts in South Korea. The final alleged perpetrator of a stabbing rampage that shocked Canada has died after a 3-day search for him. Police say 32-year-old Miles Sanderson experienced medical distress and died after he was captured. Sanderson's brother, Damien, who fled with him, was found dead on Tuesday. Police in Memphis, Tennessee, say a man who drove around the city shooting at people during an hours-long rampage has been arrested. Police say the 19-year-old suspect, Ezekiel Kelly, recorded his actions on Facebook. And hundreds of Marlborough Sounds residents remain cut off after a storm caused further damage to the remote roading network, but some are finding alternative modes of transport. Skipper Jared Rowe told Checkpoint they have been transporting people and vehicles in the worst affected areas by barge 5 days a week. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, nothing to report on our major roads. In Auckland, there was a crash blocking lanes southbound on State Highway 1 just before Highbrook Drive off-ramp, but that's now clear of all lanes. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Thanks, Evie. I was just engrossed in reading a bunch of the feedback we're getting on the issue of the police taking photographs and storing them, in many cases illegally, according to a report released today. This listener says, my teenage daughter was missing several times last year. The photos police took enabled us to remove her from a gang house and keep her safe. Keep doing it, says Mike in Masterton. Another listener says it's called profiling. The police should be about upholding the law, not breaking it. Grabbing and retaining photos of rangatahi is surveillance and an assumption of future guilt. It's got to stop, says Maggie in Devonport. Mark says taking photos of criminal suspects is a valuable and harmless tool in helping to fight crime. The police need support from the public, not condemnation from privacy wonks. But this, again, this person says, taking photos of innocent people, what are the police thinking? It's a clear infringement of human rights. I'm no lawyer, but surely it's innocent until proven guilty. Charge them first, then take the photos. Very polarising, this one, so do keep the feedback coming. 2101, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The government is actively considering scrapping the traffic light framework completely. The system has guided New Zealand's COVID response since December last year. But with COVID case numbers and hospitalisations at their lowest levels in months, the country's pandemic response is in for a shake-up. Here's our political reporter, Katie Scotcher.
New Zealand is emerging out the other side of the winter COVID wave.
Reported cases and hospitalisations are now at the lowest levels that we have seen since February this year.
The Ministry of Health's Deputy Director General, Andrew Old, says New Zealand is moving into a new stage of the pandemic. And on Monday, Cabinet will consider what restrictions should be in place for this new phase.
We're at the point now where we're considering what our future measures will look like. We've had them on
regular rotation of consideration. We did say as we came out of winter, we would look at our settings overall to check that they're fit for purpose. So we're going through that process and we'll look to make announcements next week.
The country's COVID response has been managed by the traffic light framework for almost a year and has been at the orange setting for many months. Under orange, the only requirement is people wear masks on public transport, domestic flights, inside public venues like libraries, healthcare services and retail businesses. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says ministers are actively considering scrapping the traffic light system altogether.
No final decisions have been taken. We'll be looking to make announcements once we've taken those decisions.
ACT leader David Seymour says it's time for the framework to go.
It no longer makes sense. It started out as a regime of vaccine passes, crowd size limits, masking requirements and tracing requirements. All of those, except for a crowd size limit at red and masking at orange, have now gone. There aren't enough variables to justify 3 different traffic lights or the system.
National's Chris Bishop also wants the traffic light system to be scrapped.
It's important that we retain an isolation period for people who get COVID, and it's important that people wear masks in high-risk settings, so aged care facilities, also hospital settings as well. I think that makes sense. But we do need to move to a system of personal responsibility and individual choice.
Microbiologist Susie Wiles says the traffic light framework was developed before the arrival of the Omicron variant and doesn't reflect the evolving nature of the pandemic. But she says the government can't completely ditch COVID-19 protections.
What we need are public health measures that will help us live in this world that have this nasty virus in it. We can't just abandon everything, because where that lies is, more illness, more disruptions caused by illness, and more death.
Dr Wiles wants there to be greater focus on improving ventilation and increased use of rapid antigen tests. We'll find out next week what changes to New Zealand's COVID response Cabinet has agreed to make.
Katie Scotcher reporting there. It is 12 minutes to 6. Let us know whether you reckon we should ditch the traffic light system altogether or not. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Kia amo tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The suspect in Canada's stabbing spree in Saskatchewan has died after being arrested. 32-year-old Miles Sanderson led police on a 3-day manhunt after 10 people were killed and 18 others injured. World Watch's Paulina Lau has the latest.
A shocking mass stabbing and an intensive 3-day manhunt in Saskatchewan has ended with 2 brothers at the centre of the atrocity dead. 32-year-old Miles Sanderson died shortly after being arrested by police today.
Miles Sanderson was standing outside of a residence northeast of Waka and was armed with a knife. Sanderson stole a white Chevrolet Avalanche truck with Saskatchewan license plate and fled the property.
Earlier in the week, his brother Damien was found dead with injuries that weren't self-inflicted. The brothers were charged with murder after 10 people were killed and 18 injured across 13 crime scenes. The stabbings took place in the Indigenous James Smith Cree Nation and the village of Weldon on Monday. Today, the net closed in on Miles Sanderson. Assistant Commissioner Rhonda Blackmore says he was spotted by a police officer travelling in an unmarked vehicle.
The vehicle was directed off the road and into a nearby ditch. Police officers surrounded the vehicle and through verbal identification confirmed the identity of the driver to be Miles Sanderson. He was arrested by police and taken into custody. A knife was located inside the vehicle. Shortly after his arrest, he went into medical distress. Nearby, EMS were called by police to attend the scene, and he was transported to a hospital in Saskatoon. He was pronounced deceased at the hospital.
Police have yet to confirm how Sanderson died after he was arrested. Police are now investigating whether he also killed his brother during the manhunt. Miles Sanderson had been in prison serving a 4-year sentence for several violent crimes. Parole documents show a decades-long criminal history, including 59 criminal convictions since he was 18. His parents had made a public plea for him to hand himself in, and his father has a message for the Saskatchewan community.
First of all, I'd like to give all my sincere apologies to the families that my son has hurt. From my bottom of my heart, I mean it. I'm so sorry. I don't know what else to say, what to do. But I do apologise.
The attack has shocked the rural community, and the families of the victims have been grieving together. Mark Arkand, the chief of the Saskatoon Tribal Council, lost both his nephew and sister Bonnie, who was killed after responding to calls for help.
She's not a victim. She's a hero. We're hurting. We're broken, but we're not defeated.
Families say they want answers in the hope it will bring closure and they can start to heal.
That report from Paulina Lau. It is 9 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Amateur enthusiasts and scientists alike are doubling down on efforts to find an elusive meteorite that crashed to Earth last week, probably on farmland between Middlemarch and Outram in Otago. So far, the lump of space rocks evaded searchers, including geology students from Otago Uni. But reinforcements are on the way, and footage from an array of cameras should narrow the search field. Planetary astronomer and senior lecturer at Canterbury University, Dr. Michelle Bannister, is also a member of Fireballs Aotearoa. Yep, it's a thing, a group dedicated to finding freshly fallen meteorites. She's driving to Dunedin right now to join the hunt.
We're at the moment trying to understand the outcome of an event that happened just over a week ago now, where a bright meteor was seen, a fireball, one bright enough that it's really bright, so we call that a fireball, was seen by 5 of the cameras that we set up as part of this collaboration just outside of Dunedin. So we're trying to see what's happened as a result of that and whether it did drop any meteorites.
So are you convinced there is actually something to find, that some kind of, remnants of the fireball remain intact?
What we can say is what the modelling suggests. What the universe actually tries to give us as a result of that, it's always hard to say what reality is going to bring in as a result. But we're hopeful. We're quite hopeful.
And how accurate do you think the location is where you're going to be searching?
Well, we're very fortunate in this because the University of Otago and Otago Museum, supported by MB's Curious Minds and the Raspberry Pi group, have provided enough cameras across a number of Otago schools that we saw this with 5 different cameras. And so that means we have a pretty good location. We're not searching the whole of Otago or Southland with this. It's more manageable to do with a group of people.
Michelle, could you put a size on the area that you're actually searching in? About how big is it?
Enough that it needs a lot of people with a couple of days, and not so much that you'd have to drive across it for 2 hours.
Okay. So what's the deal? Is it finders keepers?
If anything's found, it's going to be a gift. It's going to be benefiting the students at the university and the school kids who are involved with this. It's going to be available for the public to see, hopefully at the Otago Museum, and it's going to help unveil the story of how our planet, how the planets of the solar system, how that all came to be. It's a little piece of that story.
But who actually owns the rock? Is it where it lands? If you own the land it lands on, you own it?
That's the understanding.
Okay, so you're reliant on whoever's property it's on to, loan it to you, in essence.
Yeah, the goodwill of the public has been really important with meteorite finds in the past. There was one in Auckland that went to, the national interest in that way. They can't be exported, for instance. We have legislation on that. But overseas, when these things have fallen, the really lovely one last year was one called Winchcombe, which actually just fell on someone's driveway. And the family walked out and went, oh, this looks like a little charcoal briquette has just gone smack on the driveway. And because they'd seen the media reports around, they called it in and went, hey, come and look at this. And it turned out to be a meteorite, and now it's sitting in the Natural History Museum in London where everyone can go and see it.
Are you excited?
Oh, yeah. I'm delighted to see, the enthusiasm we've been seeing from students who are part of this. There's been a team at Otago who have been, working their tails off organising all of this, the logistics, the keenness from the school kids who are part of this. Yeah, it's going to be quite delightful. And even if we don't find anything at all, if it's, somewhere swallowed up in a very boggy piece of paddock, then everyone still had an awful lot of fun and figured out a little more about their corner of the universe. And that's great.
Michelle, what do you take on a fireball hunt? Is it like a torch and a peanut butter sandwich or what?
Warm clothing, good sturdy boots, and the ability to look around your feet.
Wow, wouldn't it be great if you were the one who found it? That's Dr. Michelle Bannister, who's going on a rock hunt, really. Lower Hutt locals got a large and somewhat furry surprise as they walked on Petone Beach this morning. A leopard seal decided to park up for a nap, and while it seemed relaxed, there were concerns about people getting too close. Rosie Gordon and cameraman Angus Drever went to check it out, from a distance, of course.
Soaking up the sun and trying to get some sleep. This leopard seal turning Petone Beach into its bedroom this morning, much to the surprise and delight of locals.
Oh, this is amazing. This is just a dream come true. Yeah, I've lived in Wellington all my life and never seen one on the beach here. Never.
I just think it's really cool to see it in like its natural habitat rather than in a zoo or something like that.
Despite its size, some found the seal hard to spot. In the time RNZ was there, 3 people walked within a few metres of the animal. Scientist Jevony Forbes has studied how leopard seals interact with humans and was keeping lookout.
Leopard seals, like most wildlife, will give you a good warning before they would try to hurt you. And we have seen her do that a couple of times this morning when people have got too close. Leopard seals, they'll raise their head, open their mouths, and as big apex predators, that's usually enough to scare anyone off.
People weren't the only problem. Martin Vermonden had to chase away a dog, which was off its leash and running into the leopard seal's path.
There's a lot of dogs not on the leash here. So yeah, just have to be careful because you really don't want a dog to get too close.
Most owners did comply with the beach's dog-on-leash rules, and at about mid-morning, locals set up a barrier with driftwood around the perimeter of the seal. Local Sandra Goodhart felt officials should have got to the beach sooner to do that work.
I'm really concerned because you could get a big dog come running along and attack that before anybody could stop it. So yeah. I'd like to see a barrier around the poor thing so that nothing happens.
When Department of Conservation rangers did arrive, they set up a slightly more official seal-only zone with caution tape. Biodiversity Ranger David Moss was pleased to find the animal in good nick.
It's looking very healthy. It's resting up, it's been fairly rough on the south coast for the last couple of days.
David Moss says the leopard seal looks to be a young adult. Its visit is relatively unusual for Wellington, which gets 1 or 2 leopard seals on its beaches each year.
We're expecting the leopard seal will be here possibly through a tide cycle and will just take itself back out to sea, and maybe it will turn up elsewhere on another beach. We'll just wait and see.
Petone residents left the beach, wondering how long its newest resident might be staying.
Rosie Gordon and Angus Drever with that story, and we're reliably informed that the seal has now left the beach and was last seen heading for Soames Island in Wellington Harbour. It's super cute. Do check out the video. It'll be on our web page. Some more of your feedback now on the issue of police. This person says they're illegally, unethically taking photos of innocent, disproportionately Māori people. This is obviously racial profiling. On those grounds, how many obviously bigoted police officers should be fired? How many have been fired? How many will be fired? The answer, just like police accountability, equates to 0.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The police union fears a report finding officers have been routinely and illegally photographing the public could mean criminals get away with breaking the law. The police commissioner says he accepts the findings of the report by the Privacy Commission and the Independent Police Conduct Authority and believes processes could be improved. But the Police Association is rejecting findings. Association President Chris Cahill told Checkpoint that the report is nonsense.
It's the interpretation of the law that we don't agree with. It's gone too far. It lacks common sense. These are photographs of people in public places. These are photographs of gang members gathering together. These are photographs of juveniles out late at night in circumstances that are likely that they're probably up to no good.
However, Chris Cahill says the union accepts that practices to do with retaining information need to be looked at. The lawyer for former National MP Jamie Lee Ross says his client was fixated on bringing down National Party leader Simon Bridges, implicating himself in an alleged fraud. The Serious Fraud Office charged Mr Ross and 6 others over political donations. In his closing submission at the trial in the High Court, Ron Mansfield QC said Mr Ross was seeking revenge for what he believed was betrayal when he didn't get a promotion he claimed had been promised.
Now, in reality, given the drive to take down Mr Bridges, Mr Ross obviously needed to implicate or involve himself in the said fraud, and that is what he sought to do.
Ron Mansfield says Mr Ross's admissions to the SFO were unreliable and lies. The 7-week trial has now finished, with the judge reserving his decision. The ACT Party says the traffic light system no longer makes sense and the government should drop it next week. The government will decide on Monday whether to scrap the system and other health orders entirely, meaning New Zealand's remaining restrictions could be gone by next Wednesday. David Seymour believes the restrictions aren't making a difference to COVID's spread or hospitalisation rates.
To carry on with this zombie COVID response that no longer passes any kind of cost-benefit analysis is insulting to New Zealanders and costly to New Zealand's economy.
David Seymour says if there's another serious public health problem, the government should go back to Parliament and debate it. A leader of the Mount Messenger bypass protest in Taranaki says the demonstrators expected to be arrested to make a point. 10 people will face charges after the police enforced a trespass order issued by the transport agency. Waka Kotahi says the protest was a safety risk because those taking part set up camp at a worksite after breaking through a security fence. But one of the protest leaders, David Tuffy Churton, says the arrests were part of the plan.
Been agreed that they were going to be arrested because they didn't want to show that they were voluntarily leaving because the police were forcing them off, and the rest of the people are going to go down to the park at Tongaparuto.
Mr Churton says the protesters have issued their own trespass order against Waka Kotahi. The police commissioner is refusing to reveal any new information on the investigation into the children's remains found in suitcases. A family in the Auckland suburb of Clendon Park discovered the bodies while they were unpacking items from a storage unit they'd purchased. The children's identities are suppressed at the request of their family. Andrew Costa is remaining tight-lipped.
We need to focus right now on solving that investigation, and we will release the right information at the right time to support the outcome of being successful there.
Andrew Costa will also not confirm whether the police are working with their counterparts in South Korea. A UN report shows that decades of progress in life expectancy, education and economics have started to unravel following the COVID pandemic. The Human Development Index was launched in 1990 to look beyond GDP as a measure of well-being. In the past 2 years, 9 out of 10 countries have slid backwards on the index. COVID-19, climate change and the Ukraine war are blamed for putting global development in reverse. Switzerland sits at the top of the index with a life expectancy of 84 years and a median salary of $109,000, while at the other end, South Sudan has a life expectancy of 55 and people earn on average $1,200 a year. A young leopard seal that visited Petone Beach in Lower Hutt today is heading deeper into the harbour. The Department of Conservation says it was last seen heading towards Soames Island. Biodiversity Ranger David Moss says the seal is in good condition and appears to be resting up after a rough couple of days off the south coast. He said leopard seals are relatively rare visitors to the capital and are usually spotted only once or twice a year. In sport, a short time ago, the Black Caps had reduced Australia to 61 for 5 in the 21st over in the second one-day cricket international in Cairns. New Zealand need to win the match to keep the series alive after Australia won Tuesday's opening game by 2 wickets. And rugby commentator and former Tongan Rugby League international Willie Losse has died at the age of 55. He passed away in South Africa on Wednesday as he prepared to commentate this weekend's Rugby World Cup Sevens tournament in Cape Town. The cause of Mr Losse's death hasn't yet been revealed, but a joint statement by his family says it was sudden. Mr Losse's voice was familiar to rugby fans across New Zealand and the Pacific. He was a regular commentator for the Pacific Islands Nations Cup, Super Rugby and the Sevens Rugby Series. That's the news.
Conflict zones.
If you show up into one of these places and you're simply not conditioned for it physically, then it's automatically going to put you onto the back foot.
Council cutouts.
I have to admit I'm no Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise lookalike, and if it's my face that's causing the outrage, well, I should probably get some billboards printed without a face.
Consumer rights.
Really, really important for businesses to think about what they're doing in their online retail environment, because consumers are relying on that information to be accurate.
Covering the latest. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're back with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. Auckland and Northland, mostly fine. Isolated showers, mainly afternoon and evening. Remainder of the North Island, also Nelson and Bulla, partly cloudy with isolated showers today. Mostly fine tomorrow morning, then scattered showers from around midday, mainly inland, possibly heavy about the ranges. For Marlborough, areas of cloud and a few showers clearing most places tomorrow evening, but the odd shower lingering about the coast. For Canterbury, partly cloudy, isolated showers today and about Banks Peninsula tomorrow. Otago and Southland, also Westland and Fiordland, generally fine, with areas of low cloud morning and night. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods today, mainly fine tomorrow. It's 7 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e hoa, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. President Vladimir Putin says it's impossible to isolate Russia. In a defiant speech at an economic forum, he says Western sanctions imposed on his country because of the war in Ukraine aren't working. He says Asia is rising just as the West is failing, and Moscow is looking to replace Europe with China as a major customer. The BBC's Steve Rosenberg reports.
Президент Российской Федерации Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
In his energy war with Europe, a fresh salvo today from Russia's president. Vladimir Putin warned, if the West does what it's threatening and imposes a price cap on Russian energy exports, say goodbye, Europe, to Russian oil and gas.
It's an absolutely stupid decision. We will not supply anything if it's contrary to our interests. In this case, our economic interests. We will not supply gas, oil or coal. And they are not in a position today to dictate to us.
He predicted that Europe would freeze like the wolf's tail froze to the ice in a Russian fairy tale. Speaking of freezing, this sinister music video by the Russian energy giant Gazprom shows Russia switching off the gas to Europe ahead of winter. It's taunting the West after Russia did indeed shut down its biggest pipeline to Europe. In its standoff with the West, the Kremlin sees energy as its trump card, and it's playing it very publicly. The calculation is that cutting energy supplies to Europe will cause such economic pain that European governments will drop the sanctions they imposed over Russia's invasion of Ukraine in exchange for cheaper fuel. Scenes like these give the Kremlin hope. This was Prague on Sunday. Tens of thousands of people protesting at soaring energy bills and demanding an end to sanctions against Russia.
The sanctions against Russia.
So, will European leaders cave in to pressure?
It is a full-fledged energy war. If they capitulate, well, vis-à-vis this blackmail, it is not going to be good for Europe because the same methods are likely to be repeated by the Russian government in the future.
It's going to take time for Europe to reduce its reliance on Russian energy. That means that this winter could be a tough one.
The European Union has revealed plans for a price cap on Russian gas as part of a number of measures to bring down the cost of energy. It's also appealing to households and businesses to reduce the energy they use during peak hours. The BBC's Jessica Parker reports.
The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen had been expected to outline the Commission's ideas to bring down energy costs during a speech to the European Parliament next week. But under pressure to act, it seems, she's come forward with plans today. They include essentially skimming what were described as the unexpected profits of companies who are producing electricity at relatively low costs because they don't rely on gas. That money, gleaned from the nuclear, solar and wind sector, would then be channelled to households and businesses. There's also a proposed windfall tax on profits from oil, gas and coal companies. And as Ms von der Leyen explained, plans for a price cap on Russian gas imports.
Of course, the objective is here very clear. We all know that our sanctions are deeply grinding into the Russian economy, but Putin is partially buffering through fossil fuel revenues. So here the objective is we must cut Russia's revenues, which Putin uses to finance his atrocious war in Ukraine.
She said that imports of Russian gas had fallen since Moscow's invasion of Ukraine from 40% of EU imports to 9%, and acknowledged a cap could jeopardise existing contracts, but said the continent was now better prepared. Another measure put forward today is to mandate member states to reduce electricity use at peak hours. But these are just proposals, with some diplomats hugely sceptical that the plans will stay intact. Energy ministers meet in Brussels on Friday.
Jessica Parker from the BBC there. Now let's head to the US, and California is grappling with a heat wave and emergency crews are fighting numerous wildfires. Thousands of acres have already been burned and at least 4 people have died. Temperatures are forecast to remain high in the coming days, and the heat wave has left thousands of households without power and people are being told to conserve energy. The BBC's Sophie Long is there.
Well, we are now into day 5 of an intense heat wave here in California, which has pushed temperatures way up into triple digits in Fahrenheit and above 44 degrees Celsius, smashing records for this time of year. And the stifling heat continues long after the sun goes down, which is putting massive pressure on California's electricity grid. We haven't yet seen the rolling blackouts that people were warning of, but thousands of people have been left without power in places like Silicon Valley, although not the millions that people were fearing. Californians are being asked to conserve energy between the hours of 4 and 9 p.m. They're being asked not to crank up the aircon, but to keep thermostats above a certain temperature, not to use major appliances, and not to charge electrical cars during those hours. Now, these conditions are, of course, perfect for wildfires to spark and for those already burning to do so more intensely. In the north of California, 2 fires have burned through thousands of acres. In the south, about 80 miles from where I am in Los Angeles, the Fairview fire has burned through thousands of acres, killed 2 people and burned down several structures. Now, the 2 victims have not yet been identified, but authorities say they were found in a vehicle, indicating that they were perhaps trying to flee the fires, and an illustration of just how dangerous and how quickly these fires spread. Now, the heat is expected to ease off by the end of the week, but just over the horizon are the Santa Ana winds, and when they come in autumn, as they always do, if they combine with intense heat and the tinder-dry vegetation that's been baked all summer, then the conditions are perfect for wildfires to spark and for them to spread very, very quickly. So while some respite might briefly be in sight, the fear is that things could get much worse.
It's 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. There are growing fears Pakistan will take years to recover from devastating flooding. More than 1,300 people have died and 1/3 of the country was underwater at one point. Now Pakistan is dealing with the serious impact of the flooding on crops and the supply of food. The BBC's Pumsa Falani reports from Islamabad.
Sindh province is still drowning. It has not rained for days, but most of the land remains waterlogged. On the shoreline, the boats are still coming. The dangers of Mancha Lake have been contained for now, authorities say. Its banks were deliberately breached to protect urban areas and what remains of the damaged infrastructure there. But the threat is not over, and rescue teams are now working on evacuating thousands stranded in their villages. 125,000 people have been affected by the overflow water. The people whose homes were sacrificed have been left with nothing.
My
brother just died in my village because of the water that came. We thought we were going to be able to save him, but we couldn't. Around 20 people are still stranded there. Some are unconscious, some are just sitting waiting for help.
Water levels in Pakistan's biggest lake are starting to recede, officials have told the BBC. But as an additional measure, they are reinforcing flood dikes in the area. As rescue efforts continue, authorities are also under pressure to rebuild what has been lost. Climate Change Minister Sherry Rehman told the BBC that Pakistan will need international expertise.
So we're going to have to do some very important thinking, not just on our own, but with climate specialists, really, for infrastructure. Key communication lines naturally have to be restored. The railways have to be restored, all of that. So they've already started their reconstruction, and I was thinking because it has to happen, people have to cross over. Most of it will not be resilient. We neither have the money or the technical capacity at this point.
Building with the future in mind may be a luxury for those whose entire livelihoods have been lost to the floods. For now, those who make it out of these treacherous waters are troubled by uncertainty, where they will sleep and what they will eat.
Researchers say they've found a skeleton from 31,000 years ago in Indonesia, which provides the earliest evidence of a surgical amputation. Scientists searching a cave in Borneo found the remains of a person who'd had their left foot removed as a child. The BBC's Victoria Gill reports.
The remote caves that this team of Indonesian and Australian archaeologists were exploring have some of the world's earliest rock art adorning their walls. The scientists were looking for evidence of the people who created the drawings. What they found was a grave with a skeleton carefully buried inside that had its left foot missing. Closer inspection revealed what the researchers say is the first evidence of surgical amputation of a limb, carried out 31,000 years ago when this person was a child. Melandri Vlok from the University of Sydney is a bioarchaeologist who examined the ancient bones.
This is, very clear surgical technique that's been done. It's concrete evidence in the most extreme and, clear way. Very advanced surgery would have been required for this child to have survived. And if that's the case, people are sharing knowledge, people are learning and questioning their environment like like scientists do today. So 31,000 years ago, we weren't that different then.
The researchers concluded from evidence of bone healing and growth that the child lived for up to 9 years after the surgery, dying in their late teens or early 20s. And to survive in this mountainous landscape, they would have been cared for throughout their life. So the archaeologists say the discovery not only shows that our hunter-gatherer ancestors had knowledge of human anatomy, surgery and botanical medicine, but that they looked after one another.
And back home, we'll get to your feedback now. And you are a divided audience this evening on the COVID rules and whether the traffic light system should go. This person says, yep, it can go, but the mask mandate should stay. Someone else says, dish the traffic lights, very few adhering to mask mandates. Now it is time to bring on personal responsibility. Another person says, all the COVID rules should be gotten rid of, except for hospitals, old folks' homes and similar. It should be personal choice and responsibility. Last one from Cara, who says, we no longer need the overreach control of the traffic light system. Everyone is over it. Hope it disappears for good. As any parent who has a premature or sick newborn baby knows, it can be a dreadful time and you can feel pretty helpless. But a program is trying to change that by encouraging mums and dads to read books to their babies in the neonatal intensive care units. The ABC's Annie Guest reports.
I don't care, said the cat. You're a frog, so you must sit on a log.
At the neonatal intensive care unit at Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital, a father reads to his tiny baby.
I wouldn't mind sitting on a chair. Hares sit on chairs, said the cat.
Surrounded by tubes, machines and lights, some babies are on ventilators as they lie in enclosed cribs, their parents on the other side of the glass.
What about a sofa, said the...
This is an experience familiar to Matt and Jessica Balkowski, whose daughter Lara spent 98 days in the neonatal intensive care unit, or NICU, 3 years ago. And then it happened again.
And this is little Cooper. Cooper was born in February at 26 weeks and spent 104 days in the NICU. So quite an extensive time in the NICU for both of our kids.
The stress and uncertainty was compounded by feeling helpless.
One of the biggest challenges that I found as a dad in the NICU, that I didn't feel like I had a role to play. I had nothing that I could contribute.
Until one day when a nurse suggested he read children's stories through the glass to his delicate baby.
So she gave me a book and she gave me a log and I started reading. It gave myself some purpose. It gave me something to actually go in there and really focus on and know that that was mine and I could own that. I read for nearly 100 hours while I was in the NICU with Lara. I didn't keep a log with Cooper, but I still read to him every day that I was in there for at least 20 minutes.
The log is being used as part of a readathon involving neonatal intensive care units around the world, supported by a charity for premature babies called Life's Little Treasures. Its spokesperson is Karen Peters.
It's amazing to see its growth. We started it 4 years ago, and this year we have 41 hospitals in Australia and 14 internationally, with hospitals participating from Canada, Ireland, New Zealand, Portugal, Scotland, UK and the USA.
Apart from helping with brain development, it's thought reading is soothing for a baby hearing alarms, phones and doorbells in the ICU. The readathon was originally the brainchild of a nurse at Westmead Children's Hospital, and it's applauded by her colleague, clinical nurse consultant Nadine Griffiths.
But what we also know from research in America is that babies admitted directly to a NICU compared to babies admitted to a postnatal ward in a less than 24-hour period experience 14,000 words less than a baby who's with their family in a postnatal ward. We know for infants greater than 32 weeks gestation, every increase in 100 words supports their longer-term developmental outcomes at 18 months and 2 years of age.
She says there's also research showing parents' confidence increased when they were reading to their babies in the NICU.
Imagine you're an ordinary member of the public minding your own business when suddenly you start receiving messages from the world's most well-known prime ministers and presidents. That's exactly what happened to a woman who's thought to live in South England this week and has become an unlikely celebrity. The BBC's Paul Moss explains.
The woman concerned is called Liz Trussell, and when I say that, I think people are probably going to guess what happened. She has the Twitter handle @LizTruss. She's had it since 2009, and the fact that she was so quick off the mark getting into social media meant that when Britain's new Prime Minister Liz Truss wanted to join Twitter, she had to make do with @TrussLiz. The trouble is that the message didn't get through to everyone. First off the mark, we think, was the Swedish Prime Minister, Magdalena Andersson, who tweeted at Liz Trussell that she was congratulating her on becoming the new Prime Minister and was looking forward to extensive cooperation. Liz Trussell, having a sense of humour, said thank you very much, and referring to Sweden's famous national dish, said she was looking forward to visiting. Get the meatballs ready. Now, here in Britain, the Green Party MP Caroline Lucas, certainly not a fan of Liz Truss, and tweeted a rather angry tweet saying that @Liz Truss was a right-wing ideologue who was going to be disastrous for the country. However, when she discovered that she'd sent it to the wrong Liz Truss, she was unapologetic, and she said that she thought Liz Trussell might make a better job of being the Prime Minister. She has had a chance to get used to this, though, because even during the contest to be leader of the Conservative Party, people were getting the wrong Liz Truss. David Bannerman, who's a quite prominent Conservative MP, asked people to vote for @Liz Truss, said she had strength, integrity, courage and experience. Liz Truss replied saying, I agree, vote for me.
God, I love that story. Barack Obama is back at the White House in an event steeped in history. The former president and former First Lady Michelle Obama returned for the unveiling of their official portraits. As CNN's Caitlin Collins reports, amidst the jokes and applause were some pointed comments about democracy and the peaceful transfer of power.
A return to tradition at the White House today.
Barack and Michelle, welcome home.
Greeted by over a minute of sustained applause, former President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama in the East Room for the unveiling of their official White House portraits.
Nothing could have prepared me better or more to become President of the United States than be at your side for 8 years.
President Biden inviting Mr. and Mrs. Obama to the stage where they lifted blue curtains to reveal their portraits, hers by the artist Sharon Sprung.
I want to thank Sharon Sprung for capturing everything I love about Michelle. Her grace, her intelligence, and the fact that she's fine.
And his by Robert McCurdy.
Refused my request to make my ears smaller. He also talked me out of wearing a tan suit, by the way.
The 44th president then growing serious.
Presidents so often get airbrushed, even take on a mythical status, especially after you've gone, and people forget all the stuff they didn't like about you. Presidents and first ladies are human beings like everyone else. We have our gifts, we have our flaws.
The last time a sitting president invited his predecessor for a portrait unveiling was a decade ago.
That when you are wandering these halls as you wrestle with tough decisions, you will now be able to gaze at this portrait and ask, what would George do?
The long-standing tradition was put on hold when Donald Trump occupied the Oval Office and declined to host Obama, who had little interest in attending a ceremony organized by his successor.
It means so much to come back to friends.
With no direct mention of Trump today, Mrs. Obama emphasized an unmistakable message saying these traditions matter.
You see, the people, they make their voices heard with their vote. We hold an inauguration to ensure a peaceful transition of power. And once our time is up, we move on.
The former First Lady also noting her own historic role.
A girl like me, she was never supposed to be up there next to Jacqueline Kennedy and Dolly Madison. That is what this country is about. It's not about blood or pedigree or wealth.
And let's go to some of your feedback now. Keegan's got in touch to say it is very clear from the report that the police have been breaking the law. It is extremely flippant of the Police Association to try and ignore that fact. If they believe that these powers are so important, why do they not lobby the government to change the law to allow these practices? That's in response to the report today saying that they were taking photos and storing them, often unlawfully. Another person, though, says, when will folk accept responsibility for the unlawful behaviour of their youngsters in lieu of blaming the New Zealand police? Mark from Wellington says, police do not have immunity from prosecution, so when a charge is against police breaking the law, likely. Fortunately, the Police Association do not set the laws. This one, give the police more powers to stop the crime wave. A law change to allow photography of the sort that has been happening would be widely supported. Don't know, there seems to be a pretty even split on this issue with all the feedback. Owen says, I back up the police. We are fed up with crime regardless of race or age. And this one in from Gordon, who says the police are supposed to be proactively upholding the law. They're not allowed to break the law just because it makes their work easier. A few of you have texted in asking, well, people take photos all the time out in public, and how is it different when the police are doing it? I think it's about the fact they're gathering evidence, right? So slightly different scenario there. It's not just for the photo album, it's to use in court, etc. And a split on the masks as well. Some for, some again in respect of masks. Ditch the traffic lights, make masks voluntary, encourage self-wisdom and self-responsibility rather than inflexible rules, this person says. That is all we've got time for. Now, the Late News team will keep you updated throughout the night. If you want to re-listen to anything or check out anything from the show, go to Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a popo from tomorrow from 5 a.m. It's first up. With summer just around the corner, First Up looks at what some cricket associations are doing to recruit umpires. Is summer just around the corner? Does it feel like that? And also check out our website. There's lots of good video stories. We'll put them up on the webpage so you can check them out. Kia pai tōpō. Have a wonderful evening. Catch you tomorrow when it's Friday. Yippee.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Police Association President Chris Cahill says findings that officers are routinely and illegally photographing and filming the public are a nonsense. The lawyer for former National MP Jamie Lee Ross says his client was fixated on bringing down National Party leader Simon Bridges. And the ACT Party says the traffic light system isn't making a difference to COVID's spread or to hospitalisation rates, and the government should drop it when they consider it next week. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This is Music 101. I'm Charlotte Ryan, and on today's
Your
show...
handy 4-hour guide to arts, comedy and culture, books...
I'm sick of listening to a programme where the presenter tries to persuade people to gossip.
I couldn't have given 2 hoots when I was young, but I'm a bit interested now.
Saturday mornings with Kim Hill. Music 101 Saturday afternoon. Jim Mora Sunday mornings. Standing room only Sunday afternoons. We're at your place this weekend. RNZ National.
Tēnā koutou, you're listening to RNZ National. I hope your evening is going very well. Kia ora, my name's Charlotte Ryan and I'm just getting things ready for the night's show as Brian is doing his bit for local democracy and emceeing his local body elections tonight. The hustings, to be specific. My first guest after 7 is Kate Breach. She's a founding member and a current president of the Committee of Women in Space New Zealand. I'm looking forward to finding out more about this very exciting industry. But right now, it's time for the detail. Workers have been locked out, threatened with legal action and left without any means of income. And it's not for the first time.
Kia ora, I'm Sharon Brett-Kelly. Today on The Detail, it's more than 4 weeks since 145 workers were locked out of the Kawerau factory that makes most of the country's toilet paper. Their pay dispute has been dragging on for months. The workers want a rise to match annual inflation of 7.3%. The mill's Swedish owner, Essity, is offering 3% a year for the next 3 years, plus a lump sum of $4,500. It's 36 years since the last lockout here, and they still talk about it in town. It even inspired a novel, A Striking Truth, by former resident Helen McNeil.
Still reverberating, so it had a major effect not just on the number of people that live in the town, the amount of work that's available, but for those who still live there, it is still a conversation you don't have.
I've talked to people in Kawerau who say even when a deal is reached this time, there's a lot of bad blood between the two sides that will take a long time to come right, not helped by this threat from Essity.
Around 60 workers at a Kawerau paper mill have been individually named in a claim for more than $500,000 in damages.
This employment lawyer says it's an unusual and aggressive tactic.
But what astounds me is that there has been an application for damages by the employer to sort of terrorise the union and the staff members.
And its refusal to allow them to dip into their super fund.
The toilet paper giant Essity has blocked out workers from making hardship withdrawals from their own retirement savings.
Bill George is one of the workers locked out from the place he's worked at for more than 20 years. He talks about just how important the mill is to him, his family and the town, and what it's like to be locked out.
Oh no, being locked out's terrible. Yeah, it was quite a shock actually. I wasn't here for personally myself